The sky was a cold grey, the kind that made even spring flowers seem muted. At the edge of Evergreen Cemetery, Nathan Rivers stood in a black tailored suit, his jaw tight, his eyes hollow. Beside him, dressed in an elegant black veil, stood Vivian Hale, his late father's stunning young widow. The two didn't speak, but their silence screamed louder than the pastor's final prayers. As mourners slowly drifted away, whispering condolences and glancing curiously at Nathan and Vivian, the pair remained frozen at the graveside. The last shovelful of earth fell with a dull thud over Thomas Rivers' casket. That sound should have marked an end. Instead, it ignited something unspeakable. When the cemetery finally emptied, the atmosphere shifted. The grief in their eyes turned into something else, something forbidden. Without a word, Nathan stepped forward. Vivian didn't flinch. Their lips met in a kiss not of comfort, but of hunger and long-held desire. In that moment, the boundaries between loss and lust, stepmother and stepson, blurred into oblivion. For weeks after the funeral, Nathan and Vivian slept deeper into their secret world. They shared coffee in the mornings like newlyweds, signed mail as Mr. and Mrs. Rivers, and hosted dinners under dim candlelight, laughing like old lovers. Neighbors assumed they were grieving together, but what they were really doing was building a life. A new one. Together. Then came the call that shattered the illusion. It was Rebecca, Nathan's biological mother. Though long divorced from Thomas, her concern for her son had never faded. There was something off in Nathan's voice, something warm, too warm when he mentioned Vivian, and so, without warning, she drove across the state, her gut twisted with dread. When she arrived at Nathan's house, what she saw nearly stopped her heart. White roses, aisle runners, soft violin music playing in the background, and her son standing at the altar in a tuxedo beside Vivian, now glowing in a wedding gown. "Tell me this isn't happening," Rebecca whispered, choking on disbelief. But it was happening. And what Nathan confessed next didn't just break his mother's heart, it turned the entire truth upside down. Because what if the woman Nathan thought he loved had never loved him at all? That question echoed in Nathan's mind as he stood at the foot of his father's grave, watching the last traces of dirt being pressed into the earth. He had just buried the only man who ever tried to teach him about loyalty, and now Nathan was desecrating that very lesson with every heartbeat. Vivian's hand brushed against his as she turned to leave. He caught it, their fingers entwined, trembling. She looked up at him with eyes too calm for a widow, and he, still raw with grief, still drunk on the months of silent glances they had shared, leaned in and kissed her. It wasn't the kiss that shocked him. It was that she kissed him back with more hunger than hesitation. The next few days were a blur. Nathan stayed in the family estate, claiming he needed to handle paperwork, but in truth, he couldn't leave her. Every night he found himself drawn to Vivian's bedroom door, and every night she opened it before he could even knock. She didn't speak much. She didn't have to. Her presence was magnetic, dangerous, addictive. But the most dangerous thing of all, she made him feel chosen. After a lifetime of trying to measure up to his father's cold expectations, Vivian made Nathan feel like he was finally enough. By the end of the month, she had moved into the master bedroom. Nathan didn't stop her. Soon, their lives began to merge. They stopped correcting people who assumed they were husband and wife. Vivian even suggested they switch the name on the mailbox from Thomas and Vivian Rivers to Nathan and Vivian Rivers. It was a small thing, but it made Nathan feel powerful, claimed. That power didn't last long. Late one evening, while sorting through old legal documents in his father's study, Nathan found an envelope taped under the drawer. It was addressed to Rebecca, his mother, in his father's bold handwriting. Inside was a note that sent chills down his spine. "If anything happens to me, tell Nathan to be careful. Vivian knows exactly what she's doing, and it's not love." Nathan read it twice, then 3 times. His father's coldness made sense now, not toward Nathan, but toward Vivian. What had she done? What did she want? A strange new fear crept in. That night, Nathan watched her sleep. She looked peaceful, angelic even, but the note buzzed in his mind like a warning siren. When she stirred and caught him staring, she smiled and reached for his hand. He didn't pull away. He couldn't, not yet. The next morning, Rebecca showed up. She hadn't called. She didn't need to. One look around the house, floral garlands, silver table settings, and a dress bag hanging in the hallway, told her everything. "Is this a wedding?" she demanded. her voice sharp. Nathan didn't deny it. He led her to the living room where Vivian stood, dressed in white, radiant and unbothered. I love her, he told his mother, and she's pregnant. The words left his mouth like bullets. Rebecca reeled as if she'd been shot, but she steadied herself and looked Vivian dead in the eye. Are you, she asked, pregnant with his child? Vivian smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. And in that silence, longer than a heartbeat, sharper than a knife, Nathan realized that everything he believed might be a lie. What was in that smile? What had he fallen in love with? A woman or a plan? Nathan stared at Vivian, waiting for an answer that never came. Her silence was not hesitation, it was calculation. And suddenly the veil of intimacy that had clouded his judgment began to lift. Every gentle touch, every shared glance, every whispered "I love you" now felt rehearsed. I asked you a question, he said, his voice brittle. Are you carrying my child? Vivian tilted her head and gave him a look that could freeze blood. Of course I am, Nathan. Who else would it be? It was too smooth, too fast, and now too late. To ignore the pounding of his instinct, he turned toward his mother, who was already pulling something from her handbag. A flash drive? I didn't want it to come to this, Rebecca said, voice tight. But your father warned me, and when you stopped returning my calls, I installed security cameras around the house, just in case. Nathan's chest tightened. You did what? Vivian's smile vanished. Rebecca plugged the drive into the TV. Watch this, she said. The screen flickered, then displayed grainy black and white footage. It showed Vivian late at night slipping into Thomas Rivers' old office, now Nathan's. She pulled open the drawer, rifled through legal documents, and made a call. The voice was distorted, but the words were unmistakable. Yes, I've got the will. It's exactly what you said. It leaves everything to Nathan, but don't worry. I'll fix that. You just make sure the prenup clause disappears. Nathan's knees buckled. The voice was Vivian's. Calm, composed, like she was discussing dinner plans. Not erasing his legal protection. He looked at her, stunned. Who were you talking to? He asked. Vivian didn't blink. Your lawyer, she said coolly, and the father of my child. The words landed like gunfire. Why? Nathan croaked. Was any of it real? The late nights? Did you ever even care? Vivian's eyes softened, but it felt wrong. Too gentle, too well-timed. I cared about surviving, she said. Your father married me for my looks and left me with nothing. You were just easier to handle. Young, lonely, desperate to be loved. The room spun. Nathan backed away, his heart slamming against his ribs. Rebecca stood, stepping between them. You need to leave, Vivian, now. Vivian laughed. Low, bitter. You think this is over? He married me. You can't undo that with a flash drive. But Nathan was no longer shaking. He was awake now. I never filed the paperwork, he said. We signed the documents, but I never submitted them to the court. Vivian's mask finally cracked. You what? That's right, Rebecca added. Your plan failed. And when the courts see this footage, you'll be lucky to walk away with your freedom, let alone his fortune. Vivian's mouth opened, but no sound came out. Her game was up. She turned, stormed out, slamming the door behind her. The silence that followed was deafening. Nathan collapsed onto the couch, burying his face in his hands. How could I be so blind? He whispered. Rebecca sat beside him, wrapping her arms around her son. You weren't blind, she said gently. You were just human. You wanted to believe in love. He exhaled shakily. What now? But before Rebecca could answer, Nathan's phone buzzed. There's a text from Vivian. One sentence. You think it's over, but I never play alone. Who else had been part of her plan, and what was coming next? Nathan stared at the message, his hands trembling. The text glowed on his screen like a silent bomb. One sentence, no name, no punctuation, just a cold, ominous promise that whatever Vivian had planned wasn't over. Rebecca read it over his shoulder. What does she mean? Who else is involved? I don't know, Nathan whispered, but even as he said the words, dread was already rising in his gut. The doorbell rang. They both froze. Nathan stood slowly and approached the front door. When he opened it, a sharply dressed man in a navy mule suit stood on the porch, briefcase in hand, a plastic smile glued to his face. Nathan Rivers, he asked. Yes, Nathan replied warily. I'm Michael Thorne from Delaney and West. I represent Vivian Hale. I'm here to serve you a restraining order and notify you that Miss Hale is suing for emotional distress, defamation, and breach of verbal contract. Nathan blinked. What contract? Mr. Thorne shrugged. She claims you promised to marry her, then withdrew maliciously. She's also contesting the legitimacy of your father's will, citing undue influence and fraudulent amendments. That's ridiculous, Rebecca snapped. We have footage, evidence that she plotted to manipulate him. Vaughn didn't flinch. She claims that footage was fabricated, and unless you have sworn affidavits and unedited timestamps, good luck convincing a judge. Nathan felt the floor shift beneath him again. It was happening. Vivian was turning the tables, and she was no longer playing alone. She said, "She never plays alone," Nathan murmured. "Do you work with—" Vaughn raised a brow. "Let's just say Miss Hale has powerful allies, ones who've handled worse situations than this." After the lawyer left, Nathan and Rebecca sat in silence. It felt like a trap was tightening around them, one they couldn't yet see. And then came the second blow. That evening, while going through financial statements, Nathan found $250,000, 0 cents missing from the trust account Thomas had left him, transferred 2 weeks prior to a company registered under a shell name. When he tracked the LLC, he found something even worse. The listed co-owner was his family's longtime estate lawyer, Alan Brooks, the same man who had advised him to propose quickly. The same man who had drawn up the unsigned marriage license and forgot to file the prenup clause. The same man Vivian had called from the study. He wasn't just the father of her child, he was her partner in crime. Nathan's fists clenched. "She's been planning this for years." Rebecca's face paled. "And you're not just dealing with a scorned woman, you're up against professionals." "Which means," Nathan said through gritted teeth, "we need a professional of our own." He picked up the phone and dialed a number he hadn't used in years. After 2 rings, a deep voice answered. "Uncle Victor," Nathan said, "I need your help, and I need you to bring the files." And there was a pause. "Then the ones your dad locked away?" "Yes," Nathan replied, "because I think he knew everything, and now it's up to us to finish what he started." The line went dead, and in the eerie silence, Nathan realized something chilling. Vivian's game wasn't just about love or money, it was about legacy. And the question now wasn't just how to stop her, it was how far she was willing to go to erase the river's name, forever. And Vivian wasn't done playing. The next morning, Nathan's phone buzzed again. This time, it wasn't a threat. It was a photo of his father's private vault, forced open. Inside, Nathan saw the familiar leather-bound journals that Thomas Rivers kept locked away, but now they were scattered, torn apart, and taped to the inside of the vault was a single message, written in red ink. "You should have burned it when you had the chance." Nathan's blood ran cold. He rushed to the vault room, tucked behind the old wine cellar, where Thomas had hidden decades of family records, legal drafts, and handwritten notes, most of them warning about people like Vivian. But now, it was all gone. Files missing, safes cracked open with precision, surveillance cameras wiped clean. "How did she even get in here?" Rebecca asked, voice trembling. Nathan already knew. She had help from someone inside. His mind raced. There were only 2 people who knew the vault code besides him and his father, the family's financial advisor and Alan Brooks, the lawyer who had vanished the day before. Just then, Nathan's phone rang. Unknown number. He answered. Silence. Then a woman's voice, mechanical and distorted. "Meet me at 11 p.m., where it all began." The line went dead. Rebecca stepped forward. "What does that mean?" Nathan's jaw tightened. "My father's cabin, where he wrote the original will." That night, under the cover of trees and fog, Nathan arrived at the cabin alone. Its windows were dark, its porch sagging under years of neglect. But inside, a fire crackled in the hearth, and Vivian stood in the center of the room, dressed in black, her hands clasped around a small envelope. He stepped inside slowly. "You broke into my home. You stole from me. You lied about everything. Why the hell did you bring me here?" She didn't answer. Instead, she handed him the envelope. Inside was a letter from Jonas. It was dated 6 weeks before his death. "Nathan, if you're reading this, it means the truth has surfaced. I loved your mother, but I wronged her. And Vivian, she's not who you think she is. She's not just my widow, she's your sister." The words blurred as Nathan dropped the letter, staggered back, and nearly collapsed against the cabin wall. "No," he whispered, that's not possible." Vivian's expression didn't change. "He never told you, did he, about his affair with my mother? About the hush money? The DNA test I found in his death drawer. She took a step closer, her voice breaking. He left me nothing, not even the truth of who I really was, so when I met you, I didn't know either, not at first. Nathan was trembling now, the weight of betrayal upon betrayal crushing his chest. You used me. Vivian's eyes welled with tears. I loved you as much as I could. But this was always about justice, about getting back what I was denied. He backed away. You nearly destroyed everything. No, she said softly. I revealed everything. Nathan didn't speak. He just walked out into the night, each step heavier than the last. The past, the lies, the shame, it clung to him like fog. Back at home, he burned the fake marriage license, shut down the trust, and erased every trace of Vivian from his life. But something stayed with him. Not anger, not even heartbreak. Clarity. In the end, it wasn't love or revenge that defined his journey, it was truth. Because sometimes the people we grieve aren't the ones we've lost, but the ones we never truly knew. Nathan stood on the porch of the now empty estate, staring out at the garden his father had once tended by hand. The roses still bloomed, unaware of the lies that had rotted their roots. He had lost everything he thought was real. Vivian, the truth about his father, and the innocence of believing love was always pure. But oddly, he didn't feel broken. He felt reborn. In the days that followed, Nathan poured his energy into repairing what had been neglected. Not the house, not the money, but the people. He spent more time with his mother, Rebecca, learning to understand her not just as a parent, but as a woman who had endured betrayal and stayed strong. For the first time, they shared real conversations, laughter, even tears, the kind of connection he'd never appreciated before. One rainy afternoon, while sorting through a final box of Thomas's estate records, Nathan found something that made him freeze. Tucked behind an old deed was a second envelope, one neither he nor Vivian had found. It was addressed simply, to my children. Inside was a confession. Thomas had known for years about Vivian's origins. He had done the DNA test, found the truth, and kept it buried, ashamed of how much he'd failed both families. But there was something else. Attached was a revised, handwritten will, one that split the estate evenly between Nathan and Vivian. It had been signed but never filed. The letter ended with 6 words. Do right by her, if you can. Nathan sat there for hours, rereading the letter until the ink began to blur. Was it his father's last request or his last guilt? A week later, Nathan did something no one expected. He met Vivian one last time, under police supervision. She was facing charges for fraud, but pending sentencing. They sat across from each other in silence until Nathan reached into his coat and slid the letter across the table. She opened it. Read every word. When she finished, her hands trembled. He left me half, she whispered, even after everything. Nathan nodded. He knew the truth, and he forgave you. Her eyes brimmed with tears. Why show me this? He leaned forward, voice steady. Because I'm done holding on to hate. We can't change what we were born into, but we can choose who we become. That day, Nathan chose not revenge, but closure. In court, he submitted the revised will. Vivian was granted leniency. She didn't walk free, but she walked with dignity. And that somehow mattered. Years passed. Nathan started a non-profit in his father's name, the Rivers Foundation, dedicated to supporting children caught in the crossfire of broken families. He hired people who had known loss, betrayal, and regret. People like him, people like Vivian. She joined the foundation after her release, quietly behind the scenes, never asking for attention, never speaking of the past. One afternoon, as Nathan watched a group of children plant new trees in the garden, Rebecca walked up beside him. You did more than rebuild the house, she said softly. You rebuilt the legacy. Nathan nodded. Not just mine, Dad's, even hers. Because in the end, the story wasn't about what was taken from him. It was about what he chose to give back. Sometimes healing doesn't come from holding on. It comes from finally letting go. Nathan had spent so long chasing approval, clinging to illusions, and trying to repair a version of the past that never really existed. But through the fire, through betrayal, heartbreak, and truth, he discovered something far more valuable than closure. He found clarity. And he realized healing isn't always about fixing what was broken. Sometimes it's about understanding that not everything deserves to be saved. That forgiveness isn't weakness, it's wisdom. That moving on isn't giving up, it's choosing peace. Vivian's chapter in his life had been painful, twisted, and at times unforgivable, but by releasing her from the grip of his anger, Nathan released himself too. He no longer saw her as the villain, but as someone just as lost, just as wounded, trying to survive the only way she knew how. And in doing so, he finally stepped out of his father's shadow and into his own light. The River's foundation grew into more than a tribute. It became a second chance, not only for Nathan, not only for Vivian, but for hundreds of young lives touched by its work. Children of fractured homes, victims of manipulation, survivors of silence. And every time Nathan watched one of them smile again, take a step toward healing, or stand up for themselves, he remembered this story was never just about love, or betrayal, or revenge. It was about what remains when all of that is gone. Family, truth, and the strength to choose better. So if you've ever felt betrayed, if you've ever questioned the people closest to you, if you've ever been afraid to let go because you thought letting go meant losing everything, let Nathan's story remind you, you're not defined by your pain. You're defined by how you rise from it. Because sometimes the most powerful act of all is not fighting back. And not even forgiving, but simply choosing to be free. Thank you for watching this story all the way to the end. We hope it moved you, challenged you, maybe even helped you see things a little differently. If it did, please take a moment to leave a comment below. We'd love to hear your thoughts. And if you haven't already, don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more real, emotional, and unforgettable stories like this one. Hit the like button, share this video with someone who needs to hear it, and remember, healing begins when truth is told. Until next time, stay strong, stay kind, and keep believing in second chances.